The night my mother came to take everything, the ocean was trying to tear the house off the cliff. I remember the wind first, a living thing, howling so hard the windows bowed inward like lungs gasping for air. I was 21 years old, standing barefoot on the ancient Persian rug in Gran's study, clutching a black leather binder that felt heavier than guilt. Inside were the deeds to the Seacliff Resort, $50 million of salt-crusted glass and stone, every balcony facing the same furious Atlantic that had watched Gran build an empire from nothing. My name was written across the top in ink so fresh it still smelled like iron. Gran sat across from me in her cracked leather wingback, the one she'd bought the year I was born. Her hair was twisted into a knot, so tight it looked painful, silver strands glinting like fishing line in the lamplight. Her eyes were the color of winter sea, flat, depthless, impossible to read. She didn't smile. She never smiled when something important was happening. She slid the binder across the mahogany desk with one finger. "It's yours now, Elena. Every brick, every debt, every sunrise over that water. Guard it like a wound." I laughed, a small, broken sound that got swallowed by the storm. I thought birthday gifts were supposed to come with cake, not bleeding. Gran's mouth twitched, the closest she ever came to humor. "Some gifts come with teeth, child. These ones bite hardest when you pretend they don't." She was right. God, she was always right. The front door downstairs opened without a knock. Heels on hardwood. Sharp, deliberate. The rhythm of someone who had practiced walking into rooms she wasn't invited to. Then the perfume hit. Heavy gardenias and something metallic underneath, like blood under roses. Lydia. My mother. Behind her, the low, oily murmur of Harlan's voice already counting money that didn't belong to him. They weren't supposed to be here. No one was invited. Gran had made me swear to keep this morning's sacred, quiet hours. But Lydia had never needed permission to take. I came down the stairs, clutching the binder to my chest like it could stop a bullet. The foyer smelled of wet wool and entitlement. Lydia stood beneath the chandelier in a blood-red coat, arms open like she was about to embrace the entire house and everything in it. "Darling." Her voice rang off the rafters, bright and brittle as blown glass. "Happy birthday. We were just passing through. Passing through. From Boston to the middle of nowhere, Maine. On a Tuesday morning, in the middle of a nor'easter." Harlan was already uncorking champagne he'd brought himself. The cork popped like a gunshot. Foam spilled over his manicured knuckles and hissed onto the marble floor. Lydia's gaze snapped to the binder. Her pupils dilated the way a predator's do when it smells fresh meat. "Gran told us," she sang, stepping closer. 50 million. My God. A child handed a kingdom on a silver platter. "I'm not a child," I said. The words came out steadier than I felt. She laughed, light, tinkling, lethal. "Of course not, sweetheart. But empires need more than one set of hands, don't they, Harlan?" Harlan raised his glass, grinning like a man who'd already spent the money. "Family venture. Synergy. Legacy preserved. We'll handle the boring parts. Taxes, payroll, offshore structuring. You just enjoy being rich." Gran appeared at the top of the staircase, small but immovable, wrapped in a charcoal cardigan that made her look carved from the same stone as the cliffs outside. "There is nothing to preserve here," she said, voice quiet enough to cut steel, "except Elena's name on those papers." Lydia's smile never wavered, but something behind her eyes fractured like ice over deep water. "Mother. Don't be difficult. We're all on the same side." Gran descended one step, then another, each footfall deliberate. "I'm not the one who drove 300 miles in a storm to crash a birthday I wasn't invited to." The silence that followed tasted metallic. Outside, the Atlantic hurled itself against the rocks again and again, like it was trying to break into the house and drag us all under. They stayed exactly 23 minutes. I counted every second on the grandfather clock in the hall. Lydia circled the living room like a shark, trailing her manicured fingers over the spines of first edition books, over the framed blueprints of resorts she never lifted a finger to build, over the photograph of me at 16 the day I won the state architecture prize. The one where Gran's hand rests proudly on my shoulder and Lydia isn't in the frame at all. Harlan talked numbers the entire time. Gross operating profit, EBITDA, cap rates, debt service coverage ratios. Words that sounded like currency, but felt like shackles. Every time he said we, my stomach knotted tighter. When they finally left, Lydia kissed the air an inch from my cheek. Her lipstick smelled like copper. "This conversation isn't finished, sweetheart," she whispered. "Not even close." I believed her. That night, I couldn't sleep. The binder sat on my nightstand, glowing faintly in the moonlight, as if the pages themselves were radioactive. I kept replaying the way Harlan's fingers had twitched toward it, like he could already feel the money sliding into accounts with names I'd never be allowed to see. I kept hearing Gran's voice. Guard it like a wound. I didn't know the wound had been festering for years. The next morning I woke to the smell of Lydia's perfume already in the house. I found them in the kitchen, as if they'd never left. Lydia perched at the island drinking coffee from Gran's favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle that only family was allowed to touch. Harlan leaned against the counter scrolling through his phone, murmuring about restructuring options and fiduciary duty and intergenerational wealth transfer. I stopped in the doorway, barefoot, still in yesterday's clothes. How did you get in? Lydia didn't look up from her phone. Spare key. Mothers keep spares, darling. Gran never gave her spare. Harlan smiled without warmth. We're just looking out for you, kid. This is bigger than college midterms. I felt the floor tilt beneath me, like the cliffs outside were finally giving way and taking the house with them. For the next 10 days, they were everywhere. Phone calls at 2:17 a.m. that I let ring until voicemail filled with Lydia's syrupy threats disguised as concern. Emails with subject lines like opportunity knocks and attachments labeled family transition plan version 6.2. Unannounced visits where Lydia would wander the halls touching photographs, trailing her fingers over frames as if pricing what could still be sold at auction. One afternoon, I came home from class to find Harlan in Gran's study photographing documents with his phone, tax returns, trust amendments, the original hand-drawn plans for the sea cliff that Gran had sketched when she was 21 and pregnant with Lydia and broke. When I asked what he was doing, he said, "Due diligence," like that explained anything. Gran watched it all with the stillness of deep water. She brewed her tea in silence. She watered her orchids with the same measured care she once used to water me when I was small and crying because Lydia had forgotten my 8th grade graduation. She said almost nothing, but at night I'd hear the faint clack 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 of her 1964 Olympia typewriter through the walls, steady as a heartbeat, relentless as the tide. I started sleeping with the binder under my pillow. I started locking my bedroom door with the little brass key Gran had given me when I was 12. I started checking the windows before I showered, half expecting to see Lydia's silhouette in the fog. I started jumping at shadows. One evening the sky turned the color of a fresh bruise, and the wind screamed like something being flayed alive. I found Gran, on the widow's walk, coat flapping around her ankles like a broken sail, staring at the black ocean as if it might give her answers. "They won't stop," I said. My voice cracked on the last word. "No," she answered without turning. "Greed is a tide. It keeps coming until you build something stronger than water." What if I'm not strong enough? She turned then, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. Not for herself, but for me. Real, raw, terrifying. Then I will be strong enough for both of us. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver bell, the one that had hung in the original inn, the one guests rang when they needed help in the middle of the night. "This," she said, pressing it into my palm, "is how we end it." That was the night she told me the plan. She didn't call it revenge. She called it surgery. Precise, necessary, and irreversible. "Invite them to dinner," she said. "One last time. Let them think they've won." I typed the message with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. "Gran wants to discuss the transition properly. Dinner tomorrow, 7 p.m. Let's put family first." Lydia replied in 8 seconds. Finally, wisdom prevails. We'll bring the paperwork. The next 24 hours moved like molasses and lightning at the same time. Gran spent the day locked in her study. I heard the low murmur of phone calls. Her lawyer, her accountant, the private investigator she'd hired 2 years ago when the first discrepancies appeared, someone from the Maine State Police Financial Crimes Unit. I sat on the floor outside the door like a dog waiting for scraps of safety, knees pulled to my chest, listening to the storm batter the house and wondering if Cliffs ever decided to jump. At 6:45 p.m. the dining room was set for war. White linen tablecloth starched so sharp it could cut. Candlelight flickering over silver that had belonged to Gran's mother. The same silver that had been used to celebrate Lydia's birth, her wedding, her divorce from my father. The air smelled of rosemary and garlic and something darker, dread so thick you could chew it. Gran wore black, severe, elegant, the color of finality. I wore gray, the color of fog, of funerals, of girls who have learned too early that some storms don't pass. They reveal. They arrived at 6:59 on the dot. Lydia swept in wearing scarlet silk that clung to her like fresh blood. Harlan carried a bottle of 1996 Dom Perignon and a manila folder thick with what I knew were forged powers of attorney, durable trusts, addendums that would strip me of everything but the illusion of ownership. Mother. Lydia kissed Gran's cheek without letting lipstick touch skin. Harlan. She nodded at me like I was the caterer. We sat. We passed plates. We pretended to eat. Conversations circled like vultures, too lazy to land. Lydia spoke first, voice syrupy enough to rot teeth. We've prepared a management agreement. Elena retains symbolic ownership, of course, but day-to-day operations. No, I said. The single word cracked across the table like ice breaking on a lake no one realized was frozen. Harlan chuckled nervously, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. Hear us out. I have, I said. For weeks. I'm done listening. Lydia set her fork down with deliberate calm. The sound it made against the china was too loud. You're being emotional. Gran lifted her wineglass but didn't drink. Emotion is what happens when people pretend facts aren't real. Harlan leaned forward, elbows on the table like he owned it. Look, kid. Don't call me kid. Silence swallowed the room. Outside, thunder growled low and hungry, rolling in off the water like artillery. I reached for the silver folder beside my plate, the one Gran had placed there like a loaded weapon. My fingers left damp prints on the cold metal clasp. You want transparency? I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine anymore. Let's have it. I opened the folder and began laying documents on the table like a dealer laying down cards in a game that only ends when someone loses everything. Bank statements showing transfers routed through 3 shell companies back to an account in Lydia's maiden name. Wire receipts timestamped 3:14 a.m. on Christmas morning. Emails between Harlan and a Panamanian law firm discussing asset protection for funds that had vanished from the Seacliff renovation budget. A second set of books. Beautiful, fictional, damning. Forged signatures. Lydia's looping L, Harlan's tight scrawl, on loans taken against properties Gran hadn't touched in 15 years. With every page, Lydia grew paler. The candlelight turned her skin the color of old parchment. Harlan's champagne glass trembled so hard the stem sang. When I reached the final document, an amended irrevocable trust revoking all prior beneficiary clauses and naming me sole executor and owner in perpetuity, Lydia finally spoke. You can't, she whispered. I already did, Gran said. Harlan tried to stand. His chair screeched against the hardwood like a dying animal. This is slander. Defamation. I'll sue you both into the ground. It's evidence, Gran corrected, voice calm enough to freeze blood. Collected quietly. Patiently. The way one collects anything one intends to keep forever. I looked at my mother then, really looked. The woman who used to read me The Velveteen Rabbit when I had nightmares. Who taught me how to braid my hair with ribbons. Who once cried so hard at my high school graduation that her mascara ran in perfect black rivers down her cheeks. The woman who had spent the last decade draining the empire she claimed to love, one secret transfer at a time, because she couldn't stand watching someone else hold what she believed was hers by birthright. Why? I asked. My voice cracked open on the single word, raw as a fresh wound. Lydia's eyes filled with tears, real ones this time, glittering like broken glass. Because I was supposed to be the one, she said. I was the daughter, the heir, the one who waited. She gave it to you, a stranger's granddaughter. I'm not a stranger, I said. The words scraped my throat raw. I'm the one who stayed. Gran pressed the small silver bell on the table. 2 soft chimes, clear and final as a judge's gavel. The front door opened. Footsteps. Measured. Official. 2 detectives in plain clothes entered the dining room flanked by 4 uniformed officers. One held an iPad displaying arrest warrants with Lydia's and Harlan's names in bold. The other carried handcuffs that caught the candlelight like cruel jewelry. Harlan made a sound like a man drowning in open air. Lydia didn't move. She just stared at Gran as if seeing her mother for the first time in 40 years. You destroy your own child? She asked, voice small and cracked. Gran's answer was quiet, almost tender. Im saving mine. They cuffed Harlan first. He didn't resist, just kept muttering about lawyers and appeals, and this is a misunderstanding, until his voice gave out. Lydia stood slowly, wrists offered like a martyr at the stake. The officer was gentle as he clicked the steel shut, as if kindness could soften what was happening. As they led her past me, she stopped. I loved you, she said. Her mascara had already started to run. I believed her. And that was the worst part of all. The door closed. The cruisers pulled away, red and blue lights strobing across the wet windows like a heartbeat finally giving out. Gran and I stood in the sudden silence. The candles had burned low, wax pooling like tears on the white linen. The food was cold and untouched. The silver folder lay open between us like a gutted animal. I started to shake. Not from cold. From the sheer, bone-deep weight of what family could do to itself when love spoiled into hunger. Gran poured 2 inches of scotch into a heavy crystal tumbler and handed it to me. My hands were too unsteady to hold it. She wrapped my fingers around the glass and held them there until the trembling slowed. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be, I whispered. You gave me the only thing that ever kept me safe, the truth. We didn't clean up the table that night. We left the plates and the wine and the silver folder full of ruin exactly where they were, like evidence at a crime scene. In the morning the sun came up harsh and clean, the way it does after the worst storms, and the ocean was quiet for the first time in weeks. Dad came by a week later. He didn't say much, just hugged me so hard my ribs creaked, then hugged Gran the same way. When he left he pressed a small cedar box into my hands. Inside was the original brass key to the first and Gran ever bought, the one she purchased when she was 21 and pregnant and broke, the one she turned from a roach-infested roadside stop into the cornerstone of an empire. For when you're ready to build something that can't be stolen, he said. I hung it on a chain around my neck. It rests against my skin now, warm as a second heartbeat, heavier than any deed. The resort is mine. The court sealed the case in record time. Lydia took a plea. 5 years. Probation after 3. Harlan vanished somewhere south of the border with whatever cash he could still hide in crypto wallets and shell accounts. Sometimes late at night I Google their names and find nothing but old society photos. Lydia smiling at charity galas, Harlan shaking hands with politicians. They've become ghosts who used to wear my family's faces. Gran still wakes at 5 a.m. to watch the sunrise from the widow's walk. Some mornings I join her. We bring coffee in chipped mugs and sit on the bench worn smooth by decades of worry. We don't speak much. We just listen to the ocean argue with the cliffs and know that some things endure because they refuse to break. People ask me now if I miss her. If I miss my mother. I miss the version of her I thought existed. The one who